Welcome to CAM Radio, an Ahead of the Curve initiative by Cyril Amarchand Mangaldas, bringing you every Friday the latest in legal and policy. Stay tuned, enjoy listening.
Hello and a very warm welcome to everyone. India seems to be on an upward trend to become a global hub for innovation, technology, and entrepreneurship. Along their journey, there are ideas that could change the world, which may be why it is imperative to protect the intellectual property. And that could foster creativity, incentivize innovation, and maybe even spur economic development. But what are the nuances of the IP landscape in India? What are some complexities that may be inherent in India's IP landscape? And like an unprepared child in exam, what does it truly take to copyright? To explore it all, please help me welcome Swati Sharma, partner and head of intellectual property at Sri Merchant Mangaldas. Swati, it's my sheer pleasure and privilege to have you on this very interesting CAM radio podcast. We've had several very, very interesting conversations thus far, and I'm looking at a very meaningful conversation with you too. This entire conversation around intellectual property actually takes me back to my journalism days, and there was a very interesting topic of discussion where we had from a guest lecturer about the idea expression dichotomy and the idea expression theory, which basically sort of said that my idea could be of somebody else, but the entire sort of distinction limits the scope of copyright protection. It differentiated an idea from the expression or manifestation of that idea. It kind of really hits right into the eye of what we are seeing with artificial intelligence. For instance, today somebody sent me an audio clip of Mohammed Rafi actually singing a very popular Bollywood song, Tum Kya Mile. So it's a 2024 song being basically sung in the voice of Mohammed Rafi, definitely by the use of generative AI. So Rafi definitely, sadly, is no more with us, but we can still enjoy his melodies. So there's definitely an idea, and somebody else is expressing it. So I really want to understand from you, Swati, given this is the golden age, the golden era of artificial intelligence, as put by Satya Nadella, what does it really mean for entrepreneurs, especially in the AI space? How do they traverse this thin line between the idea and expression? Yes, Swati.
Thank you, Shrija. Firstly, thank you for welcoming me so warmly. I've followed you from the beginning of my career. I've read a lot of articles and things that you've covered. So it's a real pleasure for me to speak with you today and to have this heart to heart conversation about IP, which is very near and dear to me and my life and my profession. Like you said that AI today is changing how world sees people, sees technology, and the new challenges it brings with itself, the new forms of protection it is capable of lending. It has certain amount of creativity attached to it, which sees no human limit or bounds. So
Mm-hmm.
yes, it is a very exciting time. India is currently at a very exciting time, I would say, because innovation is happening at the grassroots level. It's happening with startups, with small companies, big companies. Innovation is basically the theme that India is revolving around. The Indian government is also speaking a lot about giving impetus to innovation in India. And
Mm-hmm.
therefore, AI becomes even more relevant because definitely it is one of the tools to lead innovation and changes that we will be seeing in the next decade or two.
Yeah.
Like you said, that yes, AI has many challenges. You just heard a song by a singer who passed away many decades ago, ended up singing the latest song. It obviously sounds good to us that you can relive his voice, you can relive the memories he would bring to you with the older songs, and enjoy a version of a new song in his voice and spirit. But yes, it has definitely many challenges, like you said, with respect to copyright violation. whether the personality rights of the artist, the singer, are being infringed by this new version, whether the copyright in the song, the new song, is being violated by getting a late singer perform it or sing it through an AI software. These are issues that revolve around copyright infringement. Unfortunately, India yet has not seen too much of litigation around AI. However, there are two decided cases by the Delhi High Court. One is the case of Mr. Amitabh Bachchan and the other one of Mr. Anil Kapoor, where in both the cases, the personalities of these two actors was copied by AI. Certain characters were developed which imitated the copies of the two actors, imitated the voices of the two actors. In the Anil Kapoor case, the AI also used the dialogue jhakas, which is sort of associated with Mr. Anil Kapoor. So the court in both these cases did identify that the work that was created using AI was not original work. It was definitely work that could be traced back to both these personalities. And they do enjoy huge reputation and goodwill in the country. And therefore, in order to protect their personality rights, the court did injunct the two service providers from using the images, voices, or the likeness of the two actors. So, yes, AI has immense potential, but there are checks and balances that one needs to apply. It is capable of helping the human race in various industries. You know, the kind of data that AI can manage, the kind of data analysis that AI can do, it's humanly impossible for us to do. Right. So there are advantages of AI that we as humans need to tap into, use AI more responsibly, and stay out of any kind of a legal issue that, is in the realm of copyright infringement.
Thanks for that, Swati. And that's very, very well put and very well explained as to what really is happening, especially with the two actors that you mentioned. It's very much in the public domain also, and what has been the legality associated with it. I don't really think the problem is with artificial intelligence per se, or the machine learning aspect of it, or the data science aspect of it, or the processing capacity of it. It definitely helps you do things on scale. The complexities creep in when you talk about this very specific subset of AI, which is the generative AI, which the chat GPT has unleashed, this monster, if you want to call it. But really, I mean, if there are AI tools which help you replicate somebody's work, which help you recreate a voice or an artist's creation, then we are literally talking about banning those apps, right? These apps getting out of business. So in a way, the regulation is hurting innovation here. Don't you think so?
You're right, Shrija, to an extent, and this brings me to the fact that there are currently two cases that are pending before the US courts with exactly the same issues, where the Artist Association or the Writers Guild has taken the lead to sue these two open AI softwares exactly on the point that their data, their books, or their articles have been fed into the machine learning stage. And generative AI is nothing but a copy or a reproduction, or, reproduction with minor changes to the original content, which obviously belongs to the original copyright holders, which are these artists and authors. So this issue is currently pending before the US courts. What they also seek in terms of relief from the court is that the AI owners must acknowledge that the data, when it is fed into the machine learning stage, into the AI system, must retain copyright notices, which means that any book an author may have written and is fed into the AI system, the copyright notice from the book should not be taken off, which will basically ensure that when generative AI is created, the author does get credit for the original work. Secondly, what they've claimed is a distinction between fair use and commercial use. You know, when AI platforms want to use copyrighted work just to create generative AI in terms of Q&A, in for academic purposes, etc., that would still be in the realm of fair use. However, when the AI owners themselves want to derive commercial gain out of generative AI by charging users a monthly fee, etc., that's when the AI owners actually gaining uh, money by using the copyright content of authors from whom they haven't even taken any permission, or they don't have any royalty arrangements in place. So, yes, it's a big, big issue on generative AI, on whether generative AI can be categorized as original content, or whether the original authors and writers do retain the right to be credited and retain the right to earn royalty from commercial usage of the generative AI work.
Thanks for that, Swati. So basically, the regulation will basically force or nudge founders to change their business models, right? And that sort of reminds me of a very interesting conversation with the startup founder. What they are basically doing is that they are basically creating a marketplace of AI workers. So suppose there are 10 companies who want to hire a Swati Sharma or a Shija. So what they can do is they can hire my AI worker, they can hire my AI clone, and whatever work my AI clone does for those 10 companies, I get royalty throughout the life for that.
How wonderful.
So basically, it's like the Naukri for AI clones of human beings. So I
Correct.
thought that's an interesting business model. And
No, that's
once
brilliant actually. And I know quite a lot of people, especially in the legal industry, and they would always say that, there are 24 hours in a day to do a certain amount of work. And only if you could be cloned, you would be able to do twice as much work. So that's a very, very interesting model that they are able to clone a real personality. And then they are also being legal by giving you royalty for, the usage of your personality, etc. So that's a
that's
very,
the
very clever business model.
Yeah, so that's what I'm telling you. So the cleverness aspect will not creep in with AI because we all want AI to scale us and do about 10x of what we were doing. So Swati, in that context, what is your communique to AI founders of AI startups in India? What really are the 5 things that they have to really, really keep in mind when they are dealing with this aspect of especially generative AI? AI and a subset of generative AI. Yeah.
That's a very good question, Shrija. And this is something I think I keep telling my clients on how you can handle AI more responsibly. Like we spoke about the fact that AI has tremendous advantages. And to tap into these advantages, you have to obviously be in the realm of law and also take advantage of the technology that brings. So, what I would tell entrepreneurs who are looking at developing an AI model is conduct your due diligence. At the machine learning stage, be very, very mindful of the data that you use to conduct machine learning for the AI tool. Be mindful that you do not exclude copyright notices. Have very well drafted terms of use for your website and privacy policy. It's basically your terms of use that can define the exact manner in which your AI will function and how you will divide the ownership in the derivative or the generative AI work. How it is being debated currently is that either the generative AI can be owned by the person who made the AI machine, or it could be owned by the user who prompted the AI machine to give a certain result. So, your terms of use can basically help users define and understand how you intend the content ownership to vest either in the owner of the AI platform or on the user. And then, secondly, if you're intending on making commercial gains out of your AI tools, which I think possibly most entrepreneurs would want to do, then in that case, where you understand or where you know that certain data, which is very, very critical and which is copyrighted and has been fed into your AI machine, then you do enter into certain kind of royalty arrangements with these copyright owners so that you don't face issues of copyright violation by way of generative AI work.
That is brilliant, Swati. That's so very well put. And I just hope that through this podcast, a lot of startup founders just listening to this and copiously taking down notes on this very insightful conversation that we are having. So, Swati, what is your sense when you deal with these startup founders, which I'm sure many a day which you are dealing with? I'm sure there are bad actors in every field, but do you feel that there's a certain sense of naivety, that there's genuine sort of honest admission of mistake or ignorance that people don't really have when you deal with a new technology like this, which is so rapidly evolving?
That's a great question, Shrija, because I face this day in and day out. And it is not only with startups, even with mature organizations, you will see that I wouldn't use the word ignorance, but yes, there is lack of information and there is lack of knowledge in terms of forms of protection and enforcement with respect to AI or any other new technology. So, for example, especially with startups,
Mm-hmm.
I would face an issue of reluctance in them conducting due diligence or asking IP related questions in terms of whether their IP should be protected, whether they should protect in India, whether they should protect their IP outside India, how much it's going to cost. So, cost is a big issue that I always see attached to an IP matter. What entrepreneurs don't think before spending on is an M&A deal or a private equity deal or investment coming into business. But
Yeah.
when it comes to protecting their IP, it always comes down to what budgets have been allocated for this subject matter. And I find that so challenging because for me, as a person in business, I think IP is one of the most important assets. IP is something that defines your company, it defines your business, it gives you the competitive advantage. IP is
Absolutely.
what makes your business different from someone else's business. And
Mhm.
IP protection is something that gives you the advantage of creating moats and preventing third parties from entering the same field of business as you are in. So it gives you such great competitive advantage in the long run that sometimes people fail to see in their immediate future and hence are reluctant to invest in protecting their IP. So, my message through this podcast would be that IP protection, especially in India, is not an expensive affair. It creates monopoly rights, especially in trademarks, you know.
Mhm.
Trademark protection creates a monopoly right in perpetuity. And therefore, to spend some money in initial protection can give you a perpetual right to run your business and commerce under a certain name or a brand to the exclusion of all others. And that is such a great monopolistic right to possess. And hence, don't worry about what investment comes in the shorter duration, but think about the long run.
So that's a great segue to my next question. So why do you think it's not in the psyche of startup founders? Why has it not gotten into them? The importance of IP. Do you think it's very complex and costly, whether you are an MSME or a bigger corporation? What is sort of deferring them that, okay, let's not sort of put so much of our time, energy, or a mental space to there? Is it about the current legal ecosystem, like for people or businesses looking to enforce their IP rights or defend against infringement, so you speak? So, what really happens then? Yeah.
Great question again, Shrija, because these are, I mean, you're talking about challenges that we face on a daily basis.
Yeah.
Because my issue is that people don't understand that the legal environment in India currently is so conducive to IP protection and enforcement that we are, I think, almost leading in terms of at least IP enforcement. The kind of reliefs and orders that you're able to get from courts in India, and in such short record time you're able to get those relief, that is actually unbelievable, and you would never ever get it for any other subject matter dispute in the country. So I think the reluctance comes from the part that, firstly, yes, it is an investment in the initial years and you don't see an immediate return. For example, you protected your brand. Now, until and unless you've been able to create goodwill and reputation in your brand, and the valuation in your brand has gone up, which could take 5 to 10 years, an entrepreneur doesn't immediately realize that yes, my brand has a certain monetary value which can grow over the years. So firstly, yes, the money investment is an issue. Secondly, I think a lot of entrepreneurs think that IP can come at the last and there are more burning issues to handle. But what they don't understand or what they don't realize is that, especially for patents, there are certain laws which require you to seek statutory protection first. If you've developed a technology, if you've developed a new product, if you have a new process of doing something, and you want to create a monopoly over it, then you need to file for a patent protection before you can commercialize it, before you can speak to your manufacturers about it, before you can speak to customers about it, or you can basically, before any information comes into public domain with respect to that technology, you need to file a patent for it. And if you haven't done it, you basically lose the right to file for a patent at a later stage. So a lot of issues come up when I talk to startups or young entrepreneurs. They'll tell us that they developed a new technology, but they've already gone and spoken to the developers to create this computer program for them or this user interface, etc., etc. And they've basically already spoken about their novel invention to a third party without having filed patents for it before, which
Wow.
makes them
Wow.
lose the right to seek patent protection in future. So yes, number one, like you said, investments at the early stage, because the entrepreneur doesn't realize the value he can derive from his IP in future. And number two is basic lack of knowledge and information about IP laws in the country and how they operate.
The way I'm seeing it from this conversation really is that knowing about regulation can really make or mar the journey of an entrepreneur. And if you're on the right side of the regulation, it can actually help you grow and build your startup into such a formidable institution. At this juncture, Swati, I'm kind of curious to know that when you raise external capital, especially from VCs or private equity investors, it kind of brings in a certain sense of structure, certain sense of corporate governance. Do you see VCs pressing for IP and trademarks with the startup founders, or do you see reluctance on their side also? How important is this line item for VCs then?
Oh, Shrija, you've hit the nail on the head, because I think that's the number one question any VC will ask a company that is on its growth path. That what is your business model which is different from your competitors? What patents, technology, or IP do you hold which is your monopoly, right? Because a VC, before investing, has to see what he's going to earn out of this business. And if there are 10 people who are going to be doing the same business, there's no worth in that investment. So yes, VCs definitely ask the first question, that what does your IP portfolio look like? How well are you protected? What patents do you hold? And the interesting thing that I'll tell you about this whole concept, Shrija, is that startups in their first 5-6 years, they don't look at IP protection, right? They just want to, they start a company with the intent of an IPO in the next 10 years. And they have a plan as to how they will approach VCs for investments and, building up their portfolio, etc. So they're focused on an IPO journey, but they put IP protection on the back burner. And when the VCs come in, they start this conversation with startups that, if you want to hit an IPO, if you want a better valuation for your company, you should look at IP management, you could look at IP protection, you should build an IP portfolio. So you will see, especially with me, what I've seen personally is that companies who are looking at hitting the IPO in the next 2 or 3 years, that's when they'll start building up their patent portfolio or trademark portfolio. Because the VC does definitely see a value in it. The VC does tell the company founders that you must protect your IP, you must create value in it. And that's when the company starts to sort of put money or investing into creation of an IP portfolio.
What a lovely conversation. Like, seriously, I just hope startup founders are making notes of it and this is unraveling such truths about the real knowledge of IP on the ground. And it's such a sorry state to hear this. Like, seriously. I must, at this stage, sort of ask you, Swati, then what do you think have been some of the watershed moments then when it comes to India's approach to IP? What do you say are some of the most significant changes from a legal standpoint that have benefited startups and businesses in the past decade?
Great question, Srija, because I think we are living in the golden era as far as IP is concerned. because when you talk about these watershed moments, they've been slow, they've been gradual, but they have picked up a momentum in the last 3 or 4 years to an extent, like I mentioned before. India is sort of leading the way in how IP laws are supposed to perform and the kind of relief they are supposed to bring for right holders. So I'll take you back to the early 2000s when the Indian courts basically started understanding the law that was being developed in foreign countries, how UK was developing its IP law, how US was working on IP law. And the Indian courts started to recognize those orders, those decisions, those remedies, and started passing those in the Indian courts as well. So I recollect that back in 2002, the first John Doe order, which is an order against an unknown infringer, was passed by the Delhi High Court in a case of a cable operator who was telecasting FIFA World Cup. So it goes back to, the early 2000s when the courts in the country have sort of woken up to the fact that IT as a subject matter needs to be at par globally, because businesses are developing at a certain speed which is not different. Every country doesn't have different technological advancement. Everybody is sort of at par with what's happening in terms of
Mm.
technology. And therefore, the courts, at least in India, started recognizing that. And then there were damages cases, Anton Pillar cases, Mareva injunctions. All foreign concepts that were not recognized in the Indian courts started getting recognition. Then in 2013, India started joining these international treaties. We joined the Madrid Protocol. In 2015, the Indian legislature, they introduced the Indian Commercial Courts Act, which for the first time meant that the courts would have a bench specifically to hear commercial matters or commercial disputes. And IP, being a commercial dispute, got a specific bench to get redressal for. And I think that was a turning point in at least the judicial changes or the judicial development of the law that has come about. Because the IP bench, especially before the Delhi High Court, which was created, was such a dynamic bench that it took IP laws and IP enforcement to a whole another level. You had many damages cases, there was an ex parte injunction culture that was introduced, there was electronic filing introduced, there's virtual court now thanks to COVID. I think our way of even litigating in the courts has changed. Judges are accepting virtual hearings and things like that. So it's made court proceedings so efficient that IP cases can even be concluded within a period of 6 months to 18 months. What used to take decades a few years ago has come down to a year and a half, which is absolutely brilliant for an IP dispute, where in fact you get your relief or your remedy on day one. If you are seeking an ex parte injunction, those can be granted within 1 day of filing. So, what more could you ask for in terms of relief in IP?
So there has been definitely progress and a sea change from 2000 and the way you sort of traverse this journey. So, but tell me, Swati, if I talk about the International IP Index 2024, India kind of ranked 42 out of 55, a rank that has remained unchanged compared to 023. If the ranking was seen to be as credible, what do you think are some factors that have led to this? And what do you think are some areas of improvement for India to rise up the ranks in terms of IP?
That's a great question, Srija, and I want to demystify this a little bit because when you see the ranking, it doesn't look very nice for the IT fraternity. However, you have to look at the size of the country that we live in. We are
Mhm.
the most populous country in the world. We are
Mhm.
currently the third largest trademark filer in the world and the fifth larger in terms of patents. The number of trademark applications and patent applications that are being filed on an annual basis are on a steep rise. So you have to understand that our Indian patent office was understaffed for a very, very long time. You have to understand that to hear trademark cases or to hear patent cases specifically, you need to have certain technical knowledge and information and qualification. Therefore, to get people who are well qualified to be a part of your whole uh, the IT office system is a huge challenge. And this has also been tackled with by the Indian government. I think they are filling some more than 900 posts of examiners before the IT office to ensure that the backlog of trademark applications that were filed or of patent applications that were filed comes down significantly. In fact, the numbers released this year by the Indian Patent Office was that in the last financial year, they granted more than 1 lakh patents. That's a huge number. So the fact that our country is so big, the number of filings are so large, these matters are extremely complex and require technical qualification. The fact that our Indian patent office did not have enough manpower to sort of deal with the volume of work that was coming on a daily basis is something which could have led to this ranking. I completely disagree with it now. The way things are moving right now, I think
Mhm.
you can get a trademark registered in the country within a period of 6 months. You
Mhm.
can get a patent registration in the country within a period of 2 to 3 years. So that the timelines are significantly coming down, and I'm very very hopeful that our ranking will increase immensely um, in the next edition.
That is sort of good to know. So, Swati, does that lead to the ease of doing business conversation, the larger conversation on ease of doing business in India? This entire IP law, legal legalities associated with IP?
I think you brought our conversation to a full circle, Srija, because I did want to mention this in the beginning that thanks to the Indian government that focuses on ease of doing business in India and their second campaign of Make in India, these two campaigns have actually helped us in revamping the entire IP ecosystem as it exists. Like I just mentioned the fact that now we have electronic filings, we have virtual hearings, the manpower at the IP offices has been increased. So this has significantly brought down the time in prosecution of trademark and patent applications. And obviously, if if somebody is launching their new business, if a foreigner, if an MNC is investing into India, they're looking at protecting their brands, they're looking at protecting their patents. And when once they see that it is efficient to protect in India, it's efficient in terms of timing, in terms of costing, in terms of the procedure, which is very very easy. You'll have if you go through the Indian Patent Office website, they've got these small videos and demos available even for startups or individual applicants to file on their own. It's such a simple process to follow that, like you rightly said, ease of doing business and Make in India, these two campaigns of the Indian government have absolutely helped us, I think, take leaps and bounds in the IP landscape.
Thanks for this, Swati. And what a delightful conversation. We started with AI, generative AI, implications of it, bad actors, idea expression, what startup founders should know, should not know, the warning signals, the International IP Index, watershed moments. My final question to you to discuss the IP and the relevance, especially in the business realm. Let's talk about Swati Sharma as a person and CAM being the law firm it is. How you are building out this practice at Srilamachan Mangaldas. What is the difference you think that you are bringing to the table compared to other law firms?
Shrija, that's a very, very tricky question because I think I have about 17 years of experience in the IT field, and I think I'm a student who's on its learning path. I was before CAM with an IT boutique firm where sort of that firm laid down my foundation in IP. I developed love and
That
passion
helps.
for the
That
subject.
helps, especially the technical subject like this. That would help.
Absolutely, absolutely. And what camps brings camp brings to me is this wonderful platform where I'm able to see the entire all facets of a business. You know, in an IP boutique firm, I would usually tell a client how to protect their IP, how to enforce their IP, etc. Whereas at CAM, being a full service firm, I'm able to connect with the business heads. I'm able to understand business model. I'm able to not only give them an IP strategy, but look at the business in a more holistic manner. So I think for me and even my client who comes to me, we are both on a learning curve, and I'm absolutely enjoying my time over here at CAP.
That is fantastic to know, Swati. And how would you rate like other law firms when it comes to IP litigation? Is it too much work to keep registers sort of busy throughout the year? Because as you said, it's unveiled a new era now with the entire advent of AI.
No, true. So, Shrija, every single client who comes to the firm has an IP requirement. So, in terms of volumes and in terms of advisory or any other kind of service in IP practice area, I think work is developing on an hourly basis, I would say. Therefore, I think in terms of a practice area, I think IP is one of the most dynamic practice areas. The law, like you said, keeps changing. Technology is evolving at the speed of light. You need to be abreast with what's happening internationally. And therefore, to be in the IP field is sort of you're on the constant move. So it's very dynamic, it's very challenging, and it is super creative.
Thanks for that. Good to hear. It's keeping you so busy, and other lawyers and law firms also so busy, and how dynamic it is. And so we have explored how IP can foster innovation, creativity, and economic growth. Knowledge sure is power, but when it comes to IP, it can actually be your protection. Here's to innovating, protecting, and prospering. Thank you, Swati, for joining us in the Cam Radio podcast. The time I see my listeners and get them again, I wish all of them goodbye and good luck. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shrija. It was wonderful speaking with you.
Thank you, Swati. Thank you.